r/malicious-compliance stepmom bullied me, so I used her secret will to destroy her. You worthless little parasite, Victoria hissed, her perfectly manicured nails digging into my arm as she dragged me away from the family photo wall. How dare you embarrass me in front of the Hendersons like that? I yanked my arm free, my heart pounding as I faced my stepmother in the marble foyer of what used to be my childhood home. The Hendersons had just left our dinner party, and apparently my crime was mentioning that I was pre-med at Northwestern, something Victoria had specifically told me never to discuss with her friends. I was just answering their question, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. They asked what I was studying. Victoria's laugh was sharp and cold. Oh, you poor deluded child. Do you really think you're going to be a doctor? With what money? Your precious daddy can barely afford to keep you in that dorm room, let alone medical school. My stomach dropped. What are you talking about? Mom left money for my education. Dad said. Your father says a lot of things, Victoria cut me off, her ice blue eyes gleaming with satisfaction. But I control the purse strings now, sweetie. And I've decided that money is better invested elsewhere. The grandfather clock in the corner chimed 9 times, echoing through the silence between us. This couldn't be happening. My mother had specifically set aside funds for my college and graduate school before she died 5 years ago. Dad had promised me that money was untouchable. You can't do that, I whispered. That money is mine. Mom wanted. Your mother is dead, Victoria snarled, stepping closer until I could smell her expensive perfume mixed with the wine from dinner. And what she wanted doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what I want. And what I want is for you to stop pretending you're part of this family. I felt like I'd been slapped. Victoria had been cruel before, the snide comments, the deliberate exclusion from family events, the way she'd slowly poisoned my relationship with Dad over the years. But this was different. This was her finally saying the quiet part out loud. I am part of this family, I said, but even to my own ears, it sounded desperate. Victoria smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression I'd ever seen on her face. Not for much longer. You turn 20 in 3 months, and the day after your birthday, you're out. No more free ride, no more playing house with Daddy. You'll be completely on your own, just like you deserve. My legs felt weak. Dad won't let you. Your father will do exactly what I tell him to do, Victoria interrupted, her voice dripping with confidence. Just like he always has. He's so grateful to have found love again after your pathetic mother's death that he'd sign away his own soul if I asked nicely enough. The casual cruelty in her voice when she mentioned my mom made my vision blur with rage. But Victoria wasn't done. In fact, she continued, clearly enjoying my horror, I've made sure that even if something happens to me, you'll never see a penny of what you think you deserve. I've got it all written down, nice and legal. Hidden away where your father will never think to look. She leaned in close, her breath hot against my ear. You're nothing, and you always will be nothing. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be. With that, Victoria turned and clicked away on her designer heels, leaving me standing alone in the foyer of my childhood home, feeling like a stranger in my own life. I stumbled up the stairs to my old bedroom, my hands shaking as I closed the door behind me. The room felt smaller than it had when I was a kid. Victoria had redecorated it twice since Mom died, each time erasing more traces of who I used to be. Gone were my soccer trophies and art projects, replaced with generic furniture that looked like a hotel room. I collapsed onto the bed and pulled out my phone, scrolling to Dad's contact. My finger hovered over the call button for a long moment before I put it away. What was the point? Victoria was right about one thing, Dad did whatever she wanted these days. He'd probably just tell me I misunderstood, or that we'd talk about it later, like he always did when Victoria and I fought. The worst part was how gradual it had all been. When Dad first started dating Victoria 2 years after Mom died, she'd been sweet to me. Concerned about my grades, interested in my friends, always offering to take me shopping or to get our nails done together. I'd actually been relieved that Dad had found someone who seemed to care about both of us. But the mask had slipped slowly. First, it was small comments about how I shouldn't mention Mom so much because it made Dad sad. Then suggestions that maybe I should spend more time in my room during her dinner parties because teenagers can be so disruptive. When I got accepted to Northwestern, she'd been the first to congratulate me, but somehow Dad never seemed to hear about any of my accomplishments anymore. Now I could see it all so clearly. Every family photo where she'd positioned herself between Dad and me. Every family vacation where she'd suddenly developed a headache when I tried to plan activities with Dad. Every conversation that got cut short when I walked into a room. My phone buzzed with a text from my roommate Jess, asterisk, how's the family dinner? Still alive. Face with tears of joy, asterisk. I stared at the message, not sure how to respond. How could I explain that I might not be coming back to school next semester? That the woman who was supposed to be my stepmother had just threatened to destroy my entire future. Another buzz. This time it was an email from my academic advisor about course registration for next semester. Pre-med track, organic chemistry, advanced biology, all the classes I needed to get into medical school. All the dreams my mom had encouraged when she used to help me bandage my dolls and play hospital in this very room. I've got it all written down, nice and legal. Hidden away where your father will never think to look. Victoria's words echoed in my head. What did that mean exactly? A will? Some kind of legal document? And why had she told me about it at all? Victoria was calculating and careful, she never revealed her hand unless she was absolutely certain she'd already won. I heard footsteps in the hallway and quickly wiped my eyes, pretending to study when Dad knocked on my door. Hey, kiddo. His voice was tired as he peeked his head in. Victoria said you two had a little disagreement earlier. You know how she gets sometimes, the stress of hosting makes her a bit sharp around the edges. A little disagreement. I almost laughed at how completely he missed the mark. Dad, I started, then stopped. His eyes had that glazed look they always got when he was about to defend her. Never mind. Just tired. He lingered in the doorway for a moment, looking like he wanted to say something else. But then Victoria's voice called from downstairs, something about helping her clean up, and the moment was gone. We'll talk tomorrow before you head back to school, okay? But we both knew we wouldn't. I lay awake until nearly 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling and replaying every word of Victoria's threat. When I finally drifted off, I dreamed about my mom, not the pale, sick version from her final months, but the vibrant woman who used to sneak into my room after Dad fell asleep to help me with science projects and talk about our plans for the future. I woke up with renewed determination. Victoria had made a crucial mistake tonight. In her arrogance, she'd revealed that evidence of her schemes actually existed somewhere in this house. Hidden away where your father will never think to look, that phrase kept circling in my mind like a neon sign. The next morning, I came downstairs to find Dad already gone for his Sunday golf game and Victoria nowhere in sight. Perfect. I had maybe 3 hours before they'd both be back. I started with the obvious places, Dad's home office, the filing cabinets in the den. Nothing but boring financial statements and business documents. Victoria was smarter than that anyway. She wouldn't hide something important where Dad might accidentally stumble across it. Then I remembered something. Last year, when Victoria was having the guest bathroom renovated, I'd caught her moving a small fireproof safe from her walk-in closet to the basement storage room. She'd snapped at me to mind my own business when I'd offered to help, which had seemed weird at the time. But Victoria was always territorial about her stuff, so I'd forgotten about it. Until now. The basement storage room was behind the wine cellar, filled with Christmas decorations and old furniture Victoria had banished over the years. Including, I realized with a pang, most of my mom's things that used to be displayed around the house. I found the safe tucked behind a stack of boxes containing mom's books. Of course it was locked. But Victoria, for all her cunning, had one predictable weakness, vanity. I tried her birthday first. Nothing. Then Dad's birthday. Still nothing. Then I had another idea. Victoria's prized Persian cat, Mr. Whiskers, had died 2 years ago, and she'd been dramatically devastated for months. Dad had even paid for the cat to be cremated and memorialized. Victoria was exactly the type of person who'd use her dead cat's name as a password. I typed in the cat's full registered name, something ridiculous like Whiskers von Habsburg, and heard the electronic lock click open. My hands were trembling as I lifted the lid. Inside were manila folders, jewelry, some cash, and what looked like legal documents. The first folder was labeled Insurance Policies, in Victoria's careful handwriting. The second was Investment Accounts. But the third folder made my breath catch. Last Will and Testament, Victoria Sterling Montgomery. I pulled out the document with shaking fingers. It was dated just 6 months ago, notarized and official looking. As I read through the legal language, my shock turned to rage, then to something that felt almost like excitement. Victoria hadn't just written me out of her will, she'd systematically documented how she'd been stealing from me for years. The educational fund my mother had left me. Victoria had transferred it into an account under her name, claiming it was for better investment opportunities. Dad's life insurance policy had been changed so Victoria was the sole beneficiary. Even the house, which had been in my family for generations before Dad married Mom, was now solely in Victoria's name. But the most damning part was a handwritten note paper clipped to the back, outlining her long-term financial strategy. It read like a playbook for financial abuse, complete with plans to manipulate Dad into signing over more assets and her timeline for getting me permanently out of the picture. I photographed every page with my phone, my heart racing as I heard a car door slam outside. They were back early. I shoved the documents back into the safe and snapped it shut, my fingers fumbling with the lock mechanism as footsteps echoed through the house above me. Victoria's distinctive laugh carried down through the vents. She was talking to someone on the phone, probably gloating about her perfect life to one of her equally awful friends. I crept back upstairs, trying to look casual as I emerged from the basement. The photos on my phone felt like they were burning a hole in my pocket. I had evidence now, concrete proof of what Victoria had been doing. But as the initial rush of discovery faded, the reality of my situation started to sink in. What exactly was I supposed to do with this information? I couldn't just march up to Dad and show him the photos. Victoria had spent years positioning herself as the reasonable one while painting me as the dramatic, emotional stepdaughter who couldn't accept her mother's death. Even with evidence, would he believe me? Or would he find some way to rationalize Victoria's actions, just like he always did? There you are. Victoria's voice made me jump as she appeared in the kitchen doorway. She was dressed in her tennis whites, her blonde hair pulled back in a perfect ponytail. I was looking for you. Your father and I are having lunch at the club, and then I have some errands to run. She studied my face with those cold blue eyes, and for a terrifying moment I wondered if she somehow knew what I'd been doing. But her expression remained neutral, almost bored. I trust you'll be gone by the time we get back. It wasn't really a question. You have that long drive back to school, and we wouldn't want you hitting traffic. Actually, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded, I was thinking of staying another night. I don't have classes until Tuesday. Victoria's smile flickered for just a second. Oh, I don't think that's a good idea. Your father and I have a very busy week ahead, and having a houseguest would just be complicated. A houseguest. In my own childhood home. I'm sure Dad wouldn't mind, I pressed, watching her carefully. Maybe I should ask him. Your father is very tired, Victoria said, her voice taking on a sharper edge. He's been under tremendous stress at work, and the last thing he needs is more drama from you. Before I could respond, Dad walked into the kitchen, still in his golf clothes and looking relaxed for the first time I'd seen all weekend. Hey kiddo, he said, giving me a genuine smile. I thought you were heading back to school today. I was thinking of staying one more night, I said quickly, before Victoria could interrupt. If that's okay with you. Dad's face lit up. Of course. We hardly got to spend any time together this weekend. Maybe we could order pizza and watch one of those terrible action movies you love. I saw Victoria's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. Richard, she said sweetly, remember what Dr. Morrison said about your stress levels. You're supposed to be taking it easy this week. Pizza and a movie with my daughter sounds pretty easy to me, Dad replied, but I could already see doubt creeping into his expression. Dr. Morrison was Victoria's choice of therapist, someone she convinced Dad to see after claiming his grief and guilt over my mother's death were affecting their marriage. Of course, Victoria said, her smile never wavering. I just worry about you. But if you think you're up for it. She let the sentence hang, managing to sound supportive while clearly communicating her disapproval. Dad looked between us, and I watched in real time as he began to backtrack. Actually, maybe Victoria's right. You probably should get back to school, get ahead on your coursework. The dismissal stung, but it also crystallized something for me. This was exactly what Victoria had been doing for years, using Dad's love for me against both of us. Making him feel guilty for wanting to spend time with me, positioning herself as the responsible adult looking out for everyone's best interests. But now I had proof of what she really was. Sure, Dad, I said. I understand. Victoria's triumphant smile told me she thought she'd won another round. She had no idea what was coming. I packed my bags slowly, my mind racing with possibilities as I heard Dad and Victoria getting ready for their lunch at the country club. Every few minutes, I'd glance at my phone, at those damning photographs that could change everything. By the time their Mercedes pulled out of the driveway, I'd made my decision. I wasn't leaving. Not yet. Instead, I moved my car around to the back of the house, parking it behind the gardening shed where it wouldn't be visible from the road. If Victoria thought I was gone, she might let her guard down. Maybe I'd overhear something useful, or find more evidence to strengthen my case. The house felt different when it was truly empty, larger somehow, but also more like the home I remembered from before Victoria arrived. I wandered through the rooms, seeing traces of my mother that Victoria hadn't quite managed to erase. A bookshelf with Mom's medical journals pushed to the back. A small ceramic vase that had been moved to an obscure corner but not thrown away entirely. I was examining family photos in Dad's study when I heard voices outside. My blood turned to ice. They were back already, it had only been an hour. I crept to the window and peered through the blinds. Victoria was standing in the driveway with someone I didn't recognize, a tall man in an expensive suit carrying a briefcase. They were deep in conversation, but I couldn't make out the words. Where was Dad? I grabbed my phone and crept downstairs, staying low as I moved toward the front windows. The man was handing Victoria what looked like documents, and she was signing them right there on the hood of her car. Should be finalized by the end of the week, I caught the man saying as they moved closer to the house. Perfect, Victoria replied. And you're certain there won't be any complications with the transfer? None whatsoever. Once your husband signs the remaining documents, everything will be moved into the trust as discussed. Very clean, very discreet. Trust? What trust? I heard the front door opening and barely managed to duck behind the couch before Victoria and the man entered the living room. Can I offer you something to drink, Mr. Patterson? Victoria asked. Just water, thank you. Now, about the timeline, you mentioned wanting this completed before any potential complications arise. Victoria's laugh was cold. Let's just say I prefer to be proactive. My stepdaughter has been asking uncomfortable questions lately, and teenagers can be so persistent. My heart hammered against my ribs. They were talking about me. I understand completely, Mr. Patterson said. Blended families can be challenging. The trust structure we've created will ensure that all assets are protected, regardless of any future difficulties. And if she tries to contest anything legally, she'd have no standing. Once the assets are in the trust, they're completely beyond her reach. Very different from a simple will, which can be challenged. This is ironclad. I heard papers rustling, and Victoria's satisfied sigh. My husband will be back from his massage in about an hour, she said. He's been so stressed lately, poor thing. I think he'll be relieved to finally get his affairs properly organized. Excellent. I'll return this evening with the final documents. Just remember, it's crucial that he signs everything tonight. The window for this particular tax advantage closes at the end of the month. Tax advantage. Right. I was willing to bet this had nothing to do with taxes and everything to do with making sure Dad couldn't change his mind. I heard footsteps moving toward the front door, then Mr. Patterson's voice. Oh, and Mrs. Montgomery. That other matter we discussed. I should have news about that by tomorrow. Wonderful. The sooner we can resolve all these loose ends, the better. The door closed, and I heard Victoria's heels clicking across the marble foyer. I stayed frozen behind the couch until I heard her go upstairs, probably to her bedroom. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone. I had to warn Dad, but how? Victoria had isolated him so completely that he barely trusted his own judgment anymore. And now she was planning to trap him into signing away everything tonight, while he was relaxed and unsuspecting after his spa treatment. But I had one advantage Victoria didn't know about: I was supposed to be gone. She thought she was safe to operate in the shadows. That was about to become her biggest mistake. I crept toward the stairs, my phone ready to record whatever I could find. If Victoria wanted to play games with legal documents and family trusts, she was about to learn that two could play that game. And unlike her, I had nothing left to lose. I made it halfway up the stairs before I heard Victoria's voice drifting from her bedroom, speaking in hushed tones on the phone. I pressed myself against the wall, straining to listen. No, Richard doesn't suspect anything. He's completely trusting when it comes to financial matters. There was a pause, then her laugh, that cold, calculating sound I'd come to dread. Oh please, she's 19 and broke. What's she going to do, hire a lawyer with her coffee shop wages? My face burned. She was talking about me like I was some kind of joke. The timing is perfect, Victoria continued. Once everything's transferred tonight, it won't matter what she finds or thinks she knows. She'll have no legal recourse, no claim to anything. I've made sure of that. I fumbled with my phone, trying to start a recording, when the bedroom door suddenly opened. Well, Victoria said, looking directly at me through the banister spindles. I thought I heard something. My stomach plummeted. There was no way to pretend I hadn't been listening. I was crouched on the stairs like some kind of spy. I can explain, I started. Oh, I'm sure you can. Victoria descended the stairs slowly, like a predator cornering prey. Let me guess. You forgot something. Had to come back for your charger. Or maybe. Her eyes narrowed. Maybe you never left at all. I stood up, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. I wanted to spend more time with Dad before. Before what? Before I kick you out. Victoria's mask was completely off now, her face twisted with genuine hatred. You pathetic little spy. Did you really think you could outsmart me? I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? She pulled out her own phone and swiped to what looked like a security app. Motion sensors in the basement, dear. I got an alert an hour ago that someone was moving around down there. Imagine my surprise, since I thought you were halfway back to that mediocre school by now. My blood turned to ice. She knew about the safe. I also have cameras, Victoria continued, showing me her phone screen. There I was in grainy black and white, hunched over her safe in the storage room. Very good quality. You can see everything quite clearly. The recording. The photographs on my phone. None of it mattered if she had video evidence of me breaking into her safe. Now, Victoria said, her voice deadly calm, you're going to give me your phone. And then we're going to have a conversation about what happens to little girls who don't know when to quit. You can't just. I can do whatever I want, Victoria snapped. This is my house. Those are my documents you illegally accessed. And you're trespassing since I specifically told you to leave. She was right, and we both knew it. I'd been so focused on finding evidence against her that I'd made myself vulnerable to criminal charges. Your father is going to be so disappointed, Victoria continued, pulling out her phone. His daughter, breaking into private safes, violating his wife's privacy. After everything I've done to try to help you adjust to this family. That's not what happened. Isn't it? Who do you think he'll believe? His wife of 3 years, or his troubled stepdaughter who's clearly never accepted her mother's death? Victoria's smile was poisonous. Especially when I show him the security footage and explain how I caught you stealing from me. My mind raced. She was going to spin this whole thing, make me look like the unstable one. And Dad, conditioned by years of Victoria's manipulation, would probably believe her. What do you want? I asked quietly. Smart girl. Finally asking the right questions. Victoria held out her hand. Your phone. Now. And then you're going to sit down and listen very carefully to what's going to happen next. I hesitated, thinking about the photos, the evidence I'd worked so hard to gather. Or, Victoria said conversationally, I can call the police right now and report a break-in. Your choice. With shaking hands, I passed her my phone. Victoria immediately started scrolling through it, her expression growing darker as she found the photos I'd taken of her documents. Very thorough, she said finally. I'm almost impressed. But also incredibly stupid. She looked up at me with those ice-cold eyes. Do you have any idea what you've just done to yourself? Before I could answer, we both heard the front door opening. Victoria. I'm back early. Dad's voice called from downstairs. The massage therapist had a cancellation, so they got me right in. Victoria's smile turned predatory. Perfect timing, she murmured. Then, louder, we're up here, darling. And we have a problem that needs your immediate attention. As Dad's footsteps started up the stairs, I realized Victoria had just maneuvered me into the worst possible position. I was caught red-handed with stolen evidence, no way to prove my side of the story, and about to face my father's disappointment and anger. Victoria had won again. But as she clutched my phone triumphantly, I noticed something that made my heart skip. She hadn't turned it off. And I had automatic cloud backup enabled. Dad appeared at the top of the stairs, his face flushed from the spa, looking relaxed and happy. That expression died the moment he saw Victoria holding my phone and the tension crackling between us. What's going on? He asked, his voice already taking on that wary tone he used whenever Victoria and I were in the same room. I'm afraid I have some very disturbing news, Richard, Victoria said, her voice perfectly calibrated to sound hurt and concerned. I caught your daughter breaking into my personal safe. Dad's eyes snapped to me. What? It's not what she's making it sound like, I started, but Victoria cut me off. She's been hiding in the house all day, going through our private documents, taking photographs of confidential papers. Victoria held up my phone like evidence at a trial. I have her on security camera, Richard. She violated our privacy, our trust, everything. I watched my father's face crumble, disappointment replacing confusion. Is this true? The question hung in the air like a guillotine blade. How could I explain without sounding exactly like what Victoria was painting me as, a desperate, unstable girl making wild accusations? Dad, if you would just listen. She's been acting erratically all weekend, Victoria continued, moving closer to Dad and placing a comforting hand on his arm. Making strange accusations, saying bizarre things about money and inheritance. I think the stress of school is getting to her. I am not acting erratically. The words came out sharper than I intended, which only made me look more unstable. Dad, she's been stealing from me. From Mom's fund. She has it all documented in that safe. Stop. Dad's voice was quiet but firm. Just, stop. The defeat in his tone hit me like a physical blow. He wasn't even going to consider what I was saying. 3 years of Victoria's careful manipulation had worked perfectly. I think, Dad said slowly, not meeting my eyes, you need to go back to school. Tonight. But Dad. No buts. He finally looked at me, and the disappointment there was devastating. Breaking into someone's safe. Going through private documents. What were you thinking? I was thinking about protecting our family. The words exploded out of me. She's manipulating you, Dad. She's been stealing from me for years, and tonight she's planning to trick you into signing papers that. Enough. Dad's voice echoed through the hallway. I don't want to hear another word of this nonsense. Victoria squeezed his arm sympathetically. Richard, maybe she needs professional help. This level of paranoia and hostility isn't normal for a grieving teenager. Grieving teenager. Like I was some kind of mental health case study instead of his daughter trying to save him from a predator. You're right, Dad said quietly. We should look into counseling options. My heart shattered. Not only was he dismissing everything I was trying to tell him, but now they were planning to have me declared mentally unstable. It was brilliant, actually. Victoria could discredit anything I might say in the future by pointing to my history of delusional behavior. I don't need counseling, I said, trying to keep my voice level. I need you to look at what she's really doing. Dad, please. Just look at the documents I found. Look at what she wrote about me, about her plans. The documents you obtained illegally, Victoria interjected smoothly. Richard, anything she might try to show you was acquired through breaking and entering. It wouldn't even be admissible in court if she tried to use it maliciously. Court. She was already thinking 10 steps ahead, building a legal defense against her own crimes by painting me as the criminal. But something in her phrasing nagged at me. Admissible in court. I repeated. Why would you be worried about court unless you know there's something to hide? Victoria's composure flickered for just a split second, so briefly that Dad missed it entirely. But I caught it, that moment of panic before her mask slammed back into place. I'm worried about you making false accusations that could damage reputations and relationships, she said carefully. Sometimes when young people are struggling emotionally, they lash out in destructive ways. Dad nodded along, eating up every word. But I kept my eyes locked on Victoria, and I saw something that gave me hope. She was scared. For all her careful planning and manipulation, she hadn't expected me to find those documents. And now she was scrambling to contain the damage while maintaining her innocent facade. You know what, Victoria? I said suddenly. You're absolutely right. I should go back to school. Both of them looked surprised at my sudden compliance. I'll pack my things and leave tonight, I continued, watching Victoria's face carefully. And I think you're right about counseling too. Maybe I should talk to someone professional about everything I've been experiencing. Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly. She could hear the threat buried in my reasonable tone. A counselor might actually listen to my story, might see patterns she couldn't control. Just family counseling, Dad said quickly. Someone we choose together. Someone Victoria could manipulate, he meant. Of course, Dad. I smiled, channeling every acting class I'd ever taken. I'm sorry I worried you both. I think I just need some space to clear my head. As I headed toward my room, I heard Victoria whisper urgently to Dad, we should call Dr. Morrison tonight. I'm genuinely concerned about her mental state. I closed my bedroom door and leaned against it, my heart hammering. Victoria thought she'd won completely, discredited me, isolated me, and convinced Dad I was having some kind of breakdown. What she didn't know was that I just remembered something crucial. That automatic cloud backup hadn't just saved my photos. It had been running during our entire confrontation. I sat on my bed, staring at my laptop screen as the cloud backup finished syncing. Every photo I'd taken of Victoria's documents was there, but more importantly, the audio recording from when she confronted me on the stairs was crystal clear. Her voice, cold and calculating as she talked about making sure I had no legal recourse and how Dad doesn't suspect anything. But as I scrolled through the files, my stomach dropped. The recording cut off right when Dad came upstairs, probably when Victoria grabbed my phone. I had her admitting to manipulating Dad and stealing from me, but not the conversation with Mr. Patterson about the trust documents he was bringing back tonight. I glanced at the clock. 6:47 p.m. Victoria had said the lawyer would return this evening with papers for Dad to sign. Whatever this trust was, it had to be signed before the end of the month, and from the urgency in their voices, I suspected tonight was the deadline. A soft knock at my door made me slam the laptop shut. Come in. Dad peered in, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Hey kiddo. I just wanted to talk before you head back to school. He sat heavily on the edge of my bed, running his hands through his graying hair. For a moment, he looked like the father I remembered from before Victoria, tired, human, conflicted. I know things have been difficult, he said quietly. With Victoria, with adjusting to our new family dynamic. Maybe I haven't handled it as well as I should have. My heart leaped. Was he finally seeing through her manipulation? Dad. But breaking into her safe. He looked at me with such disappointment that I wanted to disappear. Honey, that's not okay. That's not who your mother raised you to be. The mention of Mom felt like a slap. Mom would want me to protect you, I said carefully. She'd want me to make sure you're safe and happy. I am safe and happy. But even as he said it, Dad looked exhausted. Victoria makes me happy. She takes care of me, handles all the things your mom used to worry about, finances, social obligations, keeping the house running. What if she's handling more than you realize? I asked. What if she's making decisions about money that you don't know about? Dad's expression hardened. We're not doing this again. Victoria has never touched a penny that wasn't hers. She has her own money, her own investments. She doesn't need mine. Then why? I caught myself before I revealed too much. Dad, what if I could prove that things aren't what they seem? With illegally obtained evidence. Dad stood up, pacing to my window. Even if you found something that looks suspicious, the way you got it makes it meaningless. Do you understand that? Actually, I wasn't sure that was true. But arguing the point would only make me look more unstable. I just want you to be careful, I said instead. If anyone asks you to sign important papers, maybe you should have your own lawyer look at them first. Not Victoria's lawyer, yours. Dad turned around, his expression shifting to something that looked almost like fear. What papers? What are you talking about? My pulse quickened. He didn't know about the meeting with Mr. Patterson. Victoria was planning to ambush him with documents tonight, probably when he was relaxed and trusting. I don't know about any specific papers, I said quickly. I just mean in general. Mom always said you should never sign anything important without getting a second opinion. Your mother said a lot of things. Dad's voice was sharp now. But she's not here anymore, and I have to make my own decisions about what's best for this family. The dismissal of Mom's memory stung, but it also told me everything I needed to know. Victoria had convinced him that listening to Mom's advice somehow betrayed his new marriage. You're right, I said, forcing myself to sound defeated. I should pack. Dad's expression softened slightly. I love you, you know that. This isn't about not loving you. It's about learning to trust each other again. After he left, I sat in the growing darkness of my room, my mind racing. Victoria had successfully isolated Dad from me, but she'd made one crucial error: she'd revealed her timeline. Whatever Mr. Patterson was bringing tonight was clearly the final step in transferring Dad's assets where I could never touch them. But she'd also underestimated something important. I wasn't the same scared, grieving 13-year-old who'd watched her slowly take over our family. I was 19, I was pre-med, and I was absolutely furious. More importantly, I wasn't leaving tonight. I was going to be here when Mr. Patterson arrived with those documents. And this time, I was going to get everything on record. I made a show of packing my bags, stomping around my room loud enough for Victoria to hear downstairs. When I carried my suitcase to the top of the stairs, she appeared in the foyer like she'd been waiting. "Safe travels, dear," she called up sweetly. "Drive carefully." "Thanks," I replied, injecting just enough sullen teenager energy to sell the act. "I'll call when I get back to campus." I loaded my car loudly, slamming the trunk and starting the engine with unnecessary revving. But instead of leaving, I drove around the block and parked 3 streets over, then crept back through the wooded area behind our house. The tree lane came right up to the back patio, and I'd used this route plenty of times in high school when I'd missed curfew. By the time I positioned myself behind the large oak tree that offered a perfect view of the living room windows, it was nearly 8 o'clock. Dad was settled in his favorite armchair with a glass of wine, looking more relaxed than I'd seen him all weekend. Victoria sat across from him, playing the perfect wife, asking about his golf game, massaging his shoulders, refilling his glass. She was getting him comfortable and slightly drunk before the lawyer arrived. My phone buzzed with a text from Jess, *, "Did you survive the family drama?" Face with tears of joy, *. I quickly typed back, *, "Barely. We'll call tomorrow and explain everything." *. Another buzz, this time from Dad, *, "Text when you get back safely. Love you." *. The guilt hit me like a punch to the chest. Here I was, hiding in the bushes outside my own home, spying on my father who thought I was driving back to school. If Victoria was right about anything, it was that this behavior wasn't exactly normal. But then I remembered her voice on that recording, *, "She's 19 and broke. What's she going to do, hire a lawyer with her coffee shop wages?" *. The contempt in her tone steeled my resolve. At 8:23, headlights swept across the front of the house. A black sedan pulled into the circular driveway, and Mr. Patterson emerged with his briefcase. Through the window, I watched Victoria spring into action, checking her appearance in the hallway mirror before opening the door. "Mr. Patterson, right on time," I heard her say as they entered the living room. "Richard, you remember Mr. Patterson from the country club?" Dad stood to shake hands, looking confused. "I'm sorry, I don't recall." "From the Hendersons' anniversary party," Victoria said smoothly. "He was telling those wonderful stories about estate planning. Remember? You said we should really get our affairs in order." I watched Dad's expression shift from confusion to recognition that was clearly false. He was too polite to admit he didn't remember, so he just nodded along. "Of course," Dad said. "Though I have to admit, I thought this was just a casual dinner with friends." Victoria laughed her tinkling laugh. "Oh Richard, you're so scattered lately. We discussed this yesterday. Mr. Patterson was going to bring over some papers to review. Nothing complicated, just some basic trust documents to protect our assets." "Trust documents?" Dad's voice carried a note of uncertainty. Mr. Patterson opened his briefcase with practiced efficiency. "Very standard stuff, Mr. Montgomery. Given the current tax environment, it's wise to move assets into a family trust structure. Provides protection and significant tax advantages." I pressed closer to the window, my phone ready to record. Victoria moved to refill Dad's wine glass while Mr. Patterson spread documents across the coffee table. "Now, I know legal documents can be overwhelming," Mr. Patterson continued, "but I've marked all the signature lines with yellow tabs. Should only take a few minutes." Dad leaned forward to examine the papers, but Victoria quickly moved to sit beside him on the couch, effectively blocking his view of the documents while appearing to be helpful. "The important thing," Victoria said, running her hand along Dad's arm, "is that this protects everything we've built together. Our home, our investments, our future." But I caught something in Mr. Patterson's expression, a flicker of discomfort when Victoria said, "our future." It was subtle, but there. Whatever was in those documents, even the lawyer thought Victoria was overplaying her hand. I pulled out my phone and started recording, zooming in as much as possible through the window. The video quality was grainy, but the audio might pick up their voices if I got lucky. "Now, the first document transfers the house into the family trust," Mr. Patterson explained, pointing to a thick stack of papers. "This protects it from any potential creditors or legal challenges." Dad nodded, but I could see him squinting at the fine print. "Legal challenges? What kind of legal challenges?" Victoria's laugh was a little too bright. "Oh, you know how litigious society has become. This is just standard protection, darling." But Mr. Patterson cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Well, it also ensures that in the event of any family disputes, the assets remain protected according to your wishes." Family disputes. My stomach clenched as I realized what they were really talking about. "I'm not sure I understand," Dad said slowly. "What kind of family disputes?" Victoria shot Mr. Patterson a warning look, but he was apparently committed to some degree of honesty. "Blended families can be complicated, Mr. Montgomery. Sometimes children from previous relationships may feel entitled to assets, especially if they're struggling financially." The camera on my phone nearly slipped from my trembling hands. They were literally discussing how to prevent me from ever claiming what Mom had left for me. "My daughter isn't like that," Dad said, and I felt a surge of love for him. "She's never been interested in money or inheritance." "Of course not," Victoria said soothingly. "But teenagers change when they go to college. They meet new people, get new ideas about what they deserve. This just ensures there won't be any awkward conversations down the road." Mr. Patterson spread out another document. "This second trust handles all investment accounts and liquid assets." Again, very standard protection. But as Dad reached for the papers, something made him pause. "Wait. These accounts, some of these are funds that were set aside for my daughter's education." My heart hammered against my ribs. Finally. Dad was starting to pay attention to the details. Victoria's hand tightened on his arm. Richard, we talked about this. Those accounts aren't performing well where they are. Moving them into the trust will generate much better returns. But they'll still be available for her schooling? Dad asked. The pause before Victoria answered was infinitesimal, but I caught it. Of course, darling. The trust can distribute funds for any purpose we deem appropriate. We deem appropriate. Not Dad. Not what Mom had intended. What we decided. Actually, Mr. Patterson interjected, consulting his notes, the trust structure we've established gives primary discretionary authority to. Mr. Patterson, Victoria interrupted sharply, perhaps we could discuss the technical details later. Richards had a long day. But Dad was suddenly more alert, the wine fog clearing from his eyes. Primary discretionary authority to who? Mr. Patterson glanced nervously between Dad and Victoria. Well, to the primary trustee, which in this case would be your wife, since she has more experience managing complex financial instruments. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Victoria would control my daughter's education fund. Dad asked slowly. Only in a technical sense, Victoria said quickly. It's just more efficient to have one person handling the administrative details. You'd still have input on all major decisions. But I could see Dad's expression changing as the implications sank in. What happens if Victoria and I disagree about what constitutes appropriate educational expenses? Another uncomfortable pause from Mr. Patterson. The trustee's decision would be final, legally speaking. Victoria was losing control of the situation, and I could practically see her panic mounting as Dad started asking the right questions. Then, disaster struck. My phone, which I'd been holding steady for nearly 10 minutes, chose that moment to die. The screen went black just as Dad was reaching for the documents to read them more carefully. I frantically tried to restart it, but the battery was completely dead. Worse, in my panic, I stepped backward and directly onto a fallen branch that cracked like a gunshot in the quiet evening air. All three heads in the living room snapped toward the window. I froze, pressing myself against the oak tree as three pairs of eyes searched the darkness beyond the living room window. My heart thundered so loudly I was certain they could hear it through the glass. What was that? Dad asked, standing up from the couch. Victoria moved to the window, her silhouette sharp against the warm light. Probably just a raccoon. They're always getting into the garbage. But Mr. Patterson was already closing his briefcase. Perhaps we should reschedule this for another evening, when there are fewer distractions. No. Victoria's voice was sharp before she caught herself. I mean, we're so close to finishing. It would be a shame to start over again next week. Dad was still staring out the window, his posture tense. Something about the broken branch had triggered his instincts, or maybe it was the convenient timing, right when he'd started asking uncomfortable questions. Richard, Victoria said, moving away from the window and back to his side. Mr. Patterson has other appointments this week. If we don't finish tonight, it could be another month before we can get this protection in place. I watched Dad's face as he processed this obvious manipulation. For the first time in years, I saw a flicker of the sharp businessman who'd built his company from nothing. Victoria's pushiness was finally registering as suspicious. A month wouldn't matter for routine estate planning, Dad said slowly. Unless there's some urgency I don't know about. Mr. Patterson shifted uncomfortably. Well, there are certain tax deadlines. What tax deadlines? Dad's voice carried new authority. Mr. Patterson, I'm going to need you to explain exactly what we're signing here, and why it can't wait for my own attorney to review it. The silence stretched taut as Victoria realized her careful manipulation was unraveling. I could practically see her calculating her next move, weighing how much control she still had over the situation. Richard, she said finally, her voice taking on a hurt tone, I'm trying to protect our family's future. Why are you suddenly questioning everything I do? It was a masterful deflection, shifting from the suspicious documents to Dad's loyalty to their marriage. But this time, Dad didn't take the bait. Because my 19-year-old daughter just risked criminal charges to get into your safe, he said quietly. Because she's been trying to tell me something all weekend, and I haven't been listening. And because you're pressuring me to sign documents that would give you control over money that isn't yours. Victoria's mask finally slipped completely. That money will never be hers anyway, she snapped. Your precious daughter will waste it on some useless degree and then come crawling back here expecting more. At least this way, it can be invested properly. The venom in her voice hung in the air like poison gas. Dad stared at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. Get out, he said to Mr. Patterson. Mr. Montgomery, perhaps we could. Get out of my house. Now. Mr. Patterson practically threw his documents back into his briefcase and fled. Through the window, I watched Victoria and Dad stare at each other across the coffee table, years of manipulation and resentment crackling between them. Congratulations, Victoria said, her voice deadly calm. You've just chosen your ungrateful daughter over your wife. I hope you're prepared for the consequences. What consequences? Dad asked. Victoria's smile was pure ice. Check your bank accounts tomorrow, Richard. And then call your lawyer, your own lawyer this time. You're going to need one. With that threat hanging in the air, she swept from the room, her heels clicking ominously across the marble foyer. I realized I was witnessing the beginning of a war. And I was still trapped outside with a dead phone and no way to help Dad fight it. I stayed pressed against the oak tree, my heart hammering as I watched Victoria storm upstairs through the window. Dad remained frozen in the living room, staring at the scattered legal documents Mr. Patterson had left behind in his hasty retreat. This was my chance to get back inside and help him, but my dead phone was a problem. Without it, I had no way to show Dad the recordings or photos I'd managed to capture. Worse, Victoria's parting threat about checking his bank account suggested she was about to do something catastrophic to their finances. I was weighing my options when I heard the unmistakable sound of Victoria's Mercedes starting up in the garage. The headlights swept across the backyard as she reversed out of the driveway and disappeared into the night. Where was she going at 9 p.m. with that kind of fury? Through the window, I watched Dad pick up one of the trust documents, his face grim as he actually read the fine print for the first time. Even from my hiding spot, I could see his expression growing darker with each page. I had to get inside. Moving carefully through the shadows, I made my way to the back patio door, the same one I'd used for midnight kitchen raids as a teenager. Dad had never changed the spare key location, a small ceramic turtle Mom had painted years ago that sat among her herb garden. The house felt different as I slipped inside, charged with tension and the lingering scent of Victoria's expensive perfume. I found Dad in his study now, surrounded by the legal documents and what looked like bank statements pulled from his desk drawer. Dad? I called softly from the doorway. He looked up, his face cycling through confusion, anger, and something that might have been relief. I thought you left for school. I was worried about you. It wasn't entirely a lie. I saw a car leaving and wanted to make sure everything was okay. Dad gestured at the papers spread across his desk. How long have you known? The question caught me off guard. Known what? That Victoria's been lying to me. About the money, about her intentions, about everything. His voice was hollow. These trust documents, they would have given her complete control over assets worth nearly $2 million. Including your mother's education fund. My chest tightened. Dad, I tried to tell you. I know. He looked older than I'd ever seen him, worn down by the weight of his realization. I should have listened. Your mother always said I was too trusting, especially when it came to financial matters. For the first time in years, hearing him reference Mom's advice didn't seem to cause him pain. Instead, there was regret in his voice, regret that he hadn't heeded her warnings. What did Victoria mean about checking your bank accounts? I asked. Dad's laugh was bitter. She has access to most of our joint accounts. If she's angry enough. He pulled up his bank's website on his computer, his fingers hesitating over the keyboard. I'm almost afraid to look. The page loaded, and we both stared at the screen in stunned silence. 3 of their major accounts showed zero balances. The investment account that held my mother's education fund, empty. Even Dad's business operating account had been drained to just above the minimum balance. $2.7 million, Dad whispered. She transferred everything. My blood ran cold. Can she do that legally? We'll find out. Dad was already reaching for his phone. But if she moved it offshore or into accounts I can't trace. He trailed off, the implications hitting both of us simultaneously. Victoria hadn't just stolen from me. She'd destroyed Dad financially, probably as punishment for refusing to sign those trust documents. This wasn't just manipulation anymore, it was financial warfare. And she had a several-hour head start. Dad, I said carefully, there's something else you need to know about Victoria. Something I recorded earlier. But before I could explain about the audio files, we heard the front door slam open. Richard. Victoria's voice echoed through the house, sharp with panic. Richard, we need to talk immediately. She was back, and she sounded desperate. Dad and I exchanged glances as her heels clicked rapidly across the foyer toward the study. Whatever had happened in the last hour, Victoria's calculated composure was completely gone. This was about to get much worse. Victoria burst into the study like a woman possessed, her usually perfect hair disheveled and her designer clothes wrinkled. But what caught my attention wasn't her appearance, it was the terror in her eyes. Richard, thank God, she gasped, completely ignoring my presence. We have a serious problem. Someone's been accessing our accounts illegally. Dad's expression remained stone-cold as he gestured at his computer screen. You mean there's someone? Victoria's eyes darted to the banking website showing the empty accounts, and for a split second, I saw her mask slip completely. She looked trapped, cornered, desperate. That wasn't me, she said quickly. Richard, I think we've been hacked. I just came from the bank, they're saying there are transfer authorizations with my digital signature, but I never made those transactions. It was masterful, actually. In the span of 30 seconds, she'd shifted from being the obvious perpetrator to being another victim of some mysterious cybercrime. But Dad wasn't buying it anymore. Victoria, he said quietly, cut the act. I know what you did, and more importantly, I know why you did it. You got angry that I wouldn't sign those trust documents, so you decided to take everything anyway. You're being ridiculous, Victoria snapped, some of her old arrogance returning. I would never steal from my own husband. From my own family. Family? The word came out of Dad like a bitter laugh. Is that what you call systematically isolating me from my daughter and trying to steal her inheritance? Victoria's gaze finally landed on me, and the hatred there was so pure it made me step backward. This is her doing, isn't it? She's been poisoning your mind against me all weekend with her paranoid delusions. Actually, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, I have recordings of you admitting to everything. Your whole plan, your timeline, even your opinion of Dad's intelligence. The blood drained from Victoria's face. That's impossible. You gave me your phone. Cloud backup, I said simply. Everything you said is stored online, including your conversation with Mr. Patterson about making sure I'd have no legal recourse to fight you. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the grandfather clock ticking in the corner. Victoria stood frozen, clearly calculating how much damage I could actually do with whatever evidence I had. Then her expression shifted to something I'd never seen before, not just anger or manipulation, but genuine panic. You don't understand, she said, her voice taking on a frantic edge. That money, I had to move it. There are people looking for me, people from my past who would take everything if they found out about Richard's assets. Dad and I exchanged glances. This was a completely new story, and Victoria's desperation suggested it might actually be true. What people? Dad asked. My ex-husband, Victoria whispered. He's not just an ex, he's dangerous. When I divorced him, I had to disappear completely, change my name, my whole identity. He's been tracking me for years, and if he finds out I'm married to someone wealthy. She trailed off, but the implication hung in the air like a toxic cloud. You're saying you stole nearly $3 million to protect it from your ex-husband? Dad's voice was flat with disbelief. I moved it, Victoria corrected. To accounts he can't trace. Richard, you have to believe me, I was trying to protect us. But even as she spun this new tale, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Victoria kept glancing toward the window, like she was expecting someone. And now that I thought about it, her sudden return, her disheveled appearance, the panic in her eyes. What if she wasn't lying about being in danger? What if someone really was looking for her, and her theft of Dad's money had just painted a target on our entire family? The sound of car doors slamming outside made all three of us freeze. Victoria's face went white. They found me, she whispered. Heavy footsteps echoed across the front porch, followed by the sound of our doorbell ringing insistently. Victoria pressed herself against the study wall, her eyes wild with terror. Don't answer it, she hissed. Please, Richard, just pretend we're not home. But Dad was already moving toward the window, peering through the blinds at whoever was outside. His shoulders sagged with relief. It's the police, he said. 2 officers. Victoria's panic somehow intensified. No, no, no. Richard, you can't let them in. If they're here, it means he found me. It means he's been feeding them lies about me. The doorbell rang again, more insistent this time, followed by a firm knock and a voice calling, police. We'd like to speak with Victoria Montgomery. My mind raced as I watched Victoria practically hyperventilate in the corner. Either she was the world's greatest actress, or her terror was completely genuine. But that raised an even more disturbing question. If Victoria really was running from someone dangerous, what had she gotten our family involved in? Mrs. Montgomery, the voice called again. We know you're home. Your neighbor saw you return about 20 minutes ago. Dad looked between Victoria and the front door, clearly torn between his anger at her theft and his concern for her obvious terror. What exactly did you do to my money, Victoria? He asked quietly. Where did you move it? Offshore accounts, she whispered. Cayman Islands, Switzerland. Places he can't touch, can't trace back to us. You moved nearly $3 million out of the country. Dad's voice cracked. Do you have any idea how that looks to federal authorities? The pieces clicked together in my mind with horrifying clarity. Victoria hadn't just stolen Dad's money, she potentially triggered a federal investigation by moving large sums internationally without proper documentation. And if her story about running from a dangerous ex-husband was true, she might have inadvertently made us all targets. Mr. Montgomery. The police officer's voice was getting more authoritative. We really need to speak with all the residents of this home. Victoria grabbed Dad's arm with shaking hands. Richard, I know I've made mistakes, but you have to trust me one more time. If they arrest me, if they take me in for questioning, Marcus will find out where I am. He has contacts in law enforcement, people who owe him favors. Who is Marcus? I demanded. What did he do to you? Victoria's laugh was hollow, broken. What didn't he do? 3 years of marriage that was really 3 years of psychological torture, financial control, and threats that kept me trapped. When I finally got the courage to leave, I had to fake my own death just to get away from him. The pounding on the front door intensified. This is your final warning. Open the door or we'll be forced to enter. Dad ran his hands through his hair, looking older than his 55 years. Victoria, if what you're saying is true, then we need police protection, not to hide from them. You don't understand, Victoria said, her voice breaking. Marcus isn't just abusive, he's connected. Organized crime, money laundering, things that make him untouchable. The police can't protect me from him. A new sound made us all freeze, the unmistakable noise of our front door being unlocked. But we hadn't given anyone permission to enter. They're coming in, Dad whispered. Victoria bolted toward the study's back exit, but Dad caught her arm. Running will only make this worse. You don't know what worse looks like, Victoria shot back, tears streaming down her face. But you're about to find out. Footsteps echoed through our foyer, moving methodically through the house. Multiple sets of feet, more than just 2 police officers. And they were heading straight for Dad's study. The footsteps stopped outside Dad's study door. Victoria pressed herself against the wall behind the filing cabinet, her face a mask of terror as voices murmured in the hallway. Then came a firm knock. Mr. Montgomery. This is Detective Chen with the Financial Crimes Unit. We need to speak with you about some unusual banking activity. Dad exchanged a look with me, then walked to the door. Just a moment, he called, then whispered to Victoria, if you're telling the truth about being in danger, hiding will only make it worse. Come with me. Victoria shook her head frantically, but Dad was already opening the door. 2 detectives stood in the hallway, a middle-aged Asian woman with kind eyes and a younger man taking notes. Behind them, I glimpsed 2 uniformed officers. Mr. Montgomery, Detective Chen said, I'm sorry to disturb you so late, but we've received reports of suspicious international wire transfers from accounts linked to this address. Please, come in, Dad said, stepping aside. I actually discovered the transfers myself about an hour ago. As the detectives entered the study, Victoria slowly emerged from behind the filing cabinet, her hands visibly shaking. Detective Chen's expression softened when she saw Victoria's obvious distress. Mrs. Montgomery, I presume. We've been looking for you for quite some time. Please, Victoria whispered, you don't understand. If Marcus finds out where I am. Marcus Volkov is in federal custody, Detective Chen said gently. He was arrested 3 days ago on charges of money laundering, extortion, and human trafficking. You're safe now. The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. She staggered backward, catching herself against Dad's desk. That's impossible, she breathed. He's too connected, too careful. A former associate turned state's evidence, the younger detective explained. Provided enough information to bring down his entire operation. We've been trying to locate you because you're listed as a potential victim and witness. I watched Victoria's face cycle through disbelief, hope, and finally, crushing relief. The mask she'd worn for years, the careful control, the calculated manipulation, crumbled completely. I've been running for so long, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I thought he'd never stop hunting me. Detective Chen pulled out a chair. Mrs. Montgomery, why don't you sit down? We have a lot to discuss about your previous marriage and what you've endured. But first, we need to address the money transfers made this evening. Victoria collapsed into the chair, her whole body shaking. I panicked when I saw that lawyer tonight. When Richard started asking questions about the trust documents, I was terrified my cover was blown. I thought Marcus had found me, that he was coming for everything Richard had built. So you moved the funds to protect them, Detective Chin said, her tone understanding but firm. Unfortunately, transferring large sums internationally without proper documentation triggers automatic federal alerts. Dad sat down across from Victoria, his anger visibly transforming into something closer to pity. Victoria, if you had just told me the truth from the beginning. I couldn't risk it, Victoria said, looking at him with genuine remorse. I'd spent 3 years learning that trusting anyone with the truth could get me killed. So I became someone else entirely, someone cold and controlling, because that felt safer than being vulnerable. She turned to me, her ice blue eyes now filled with tears. I convinced myself you were a threat to my security here. Every time you reminded Richard of your mother, every time he chose you over me, I felt like my cover was slipping. So I tried to push you out before you could expose me. The admission hung in the air between us. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated, but mostly I just felt sad, for her, for Dad, for all the years we'd lost to her fear and trauma. The education fund, I said quietly. The money Mom left for me. Can we get it back? Detective Chin nodded. The transfers were recent enough that they can be reversed. It'll take some paperwork and time, but yes. Victoria looked up at Dad with desperate hope. Richard, I know I destroyed any chance of forgiveness, but please don't let them arrest me. I'll sign whatever papers you need, transfer everything back, disappear from your lives forever. Just please. Dad was quiet for a long moment, studying the woman he'd been married to for 3 years. Finally, he spoke. Victoria, you need help. Professional help to deal with what that man put you through. But you also need to face the consequences of what you did to my family. He looked at Detective Chen. What happens now? Mrs. Montgomery will need to come with us for questioning and to formalize her statement about Marcus Volkov, the detective said. As for the financial charges, that depends partly on her cooperation and Mr. Montgomery's willingness to work with us on restitution. Victoria stood slowly, her designer facade completely gone. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked human, broken, terrified, but finally honest. I'm sorry, she said to Dad, then turned to me. I'm so sorry for what I took from you. Not just the money, the relationship with your father, the peace in your own home. You deserve so much better. As the detectives led Victoria away, Dad and I stood in the wreckage of his study, surrounded by scattered legal documents and bank statements. I can't believe I was so blind, he said finally. I moved closer to him, tentatively putting my hand on his shoulder. She was good at hiding, Dad. That's how she survived. He pulled me into a hug, the first real one we'd shared in years. Your mother would be so proud of how you fought for our family, he whispered. I should have listened to you sooner. 6 months later, I was back in pre-med classes with my education fund restored and a father who actually heard me when I spoke. Victoria was in a treatment facility, working through her trauma while cooperating with federal investigators. She'd sent one letter to Dad, which he'd shared with me. In it, she took full responsibility for her actions and expressed genuine remorse for the pain she caused. She also included something unexpected, a small ceramic picture frame containing a photo of Mom that Victoria had hidden away years ago, unable to destroy it completely. Even when I was trying to erase her, Victoria had written, I couldn't bring myself to throw this away. She raised an incredible daughter. I kept the photo on my dorm room desk, next to a new family picture of Dad and me taken at my college graduation ceremony. In it, we're both smiling, genuinely happy for the first time in years. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. Sometimes it's simply reclaiming the life that was always rightfully yours.